So, you want to learn a language. Seems easy enough, right? You go to the App Store, you download Duolingo, learn some basic words, everything's going all right. That is, until... God, this is repetitive. Don't use Duolingo. Even if you click away from this video right now, I don't care. As long as you take away that, don't use Duolingo. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Elysse, and today we are talking about language. Shocking, I know. Specifically though, learning a language, the process of starting to learn a language, motivation. I get questions all the time on Instagram from people saying, Elysse, I need help, how do I get back into learning this language? How do you stay motivated? What resources do you have for this language? So I thought it made more sense for me to just talk about all of it under one umbrella because I feel like a lot of it is the same talk. By the way, if you don't already, please go follow my language Instagram at Elysse Speaks. That's ELYSSE. SPEAKS. I do everything on there, updates about my language learning process, tips for you guys. That's where I post my podcast, shameless plug. I do have a podcast. It's on 8 platforms. I will leave the link down below. So if you want to learn Portuguese and you're an English speaker, go listen to that. Or if you're a Brazilian Portuguese speaker and you want to learn English, you can also listen to it. Okay, that's enough self-promotion for this video. So today I'm going to be giving you guys 5 or 4 or 5, I don't know. If I have rabbit holes, it might lead me to 100, I'm not sure. But I have a lot of stuff to say about language. I have a lot of tips. Yeah, I'll be sharing my resources, what's worked for me. So keep in mind that there are different types of learners. Everything that works for me is not going to work for you. What I'm not going to say in this video is, oh, get Duolingo. Oh, use Quizlet. Although, those may be useful for some people, I feel like there's been a lot of repetition in the language community. So I just wanted to give a little bit more insightful tips on what works for me. Yeah. Without further ado, this is just going to be 4 or 5 tips that have helped me in my language journey because I've been studying languages for since I was at least 8 or 9 years old. So I would like to say I have an idea of what I'm talking about. I really hope so. If not, what's this all been for? But yeah, so my first tip if you're starting to learn a language is you have to commit. Now, what do I mean by committing? I don't mean just, having a stern talk with yourself in the mirror like, Elysse, you're going to learn this language. You're going to stay committed. You're going to do 30 minutes every week. It doesn't have to be like that. Committing is so important. You have to know a little bit about the language before you start. You have to know what type of learner you are. You have to know a lot about yourself and the language. So it's not just about the language. So there's a couple of steps to committing. One of the steps of commitment is knowing something about the language before you start. Reading a Wikipedia article, or you could go to Focus, Paul's channel. He is such a great YouTuber. He does language videos. He will just talk for 20 minutes about the features of a language. He does full videos like how similar are Portuguese and Spanish. So if you're a Portuguese speaker and you wanted to learn Spanish, you would want to watch that first. Or he does full videos just talking about, the grammar features of a language, phonics, vocabulary. You really get an idea for what the language is like before you jump in. It's important to not idealize a language. You may really want to learn Japanese because you love anime or you love Japanese culture. Learning a language is different for every single language. What I'm trying to say is just make sure you evaluate how difficult it's going to be to learn it from your native language. A person that speaks Mandarin trying to learn Cantonese is going to learn it easier than a person who speaks English trying to learn Cantonese because they have much more similarities and they're both tonal and stuff like that. Things to consider beforehand that have tripped me up later because I didn't commit and I didn't research before are things like tones, grammatical cases. If you don't know what a grammatical case is, please just Wikipedia. I don't even know what to say. It's grammar, Some languages have upwards of 20 grammatical cases. Yes, Hungarian, I'm looking at you. And some people have no idea what a grammatical case is. In English, technically we have grammatical case, but no one knows what it is because they don't teach it to us in school. So you need to research the fundamental basics of a language before you start because if you don't know what a grammatical case is, you're going to have a hard time learning Hungarian. If you don't know what tones are, you're going to have a hard time learning Cantonese because it has 6 tones. If you're an English speaker and you don't know the Hangul writing system for Korean, you're gonna have a hard time. So make sure you do your research beforehand. If you're anything like me, you've idealized a language before. I remember in high school, I tried to learn Farsi for 3 days. Oh my god. That was way beyond anything that I could even perceive. I don't even know what was going on. There was this one time last year that I tried to learn Catalan after I woke up out of a deep sweat at midnight. I was like, hey, I speak Spanish. Why don't I speak Catalan already? Where's my phone? Where's my phone? Then in February of this year, I was like, hey guys, I'm learning Korean. I literally put this big ass long ass post on Instagram and I don't know when that's coming back. I really don't know when it's coming back, but it is not soon because I'm focused on Portuguese right now. Do you know how hard it is? Do you know what I go through? Anyways, the second part of commitment is knowing your resources. So if you don't know what your resources are beforehand, you're not going to have an effective plan for how you plan to study it. It's just a plain simple fact that the resources to learn Yugoslavian Sign Language are not the same resources to learn Spanish. You need to know how many resources you have. You need to know what type of resources work best for you, whether it be, watching movies or a podcast or YouTubers or stuff like that. Or just, finding a website maybe. So I moved into my new dorm and it turns out I live right next to a fire station. Not complaining. Sorry, that was a lot of information, really quickly, but basically you need to know what are its basic features, you need to know what type of learner you are, and you need to know what type of resources you have, and if they're going to be good for you. And after doing all that, if it seems like you still want to go ahead with it, by all means. So my next tip is having a balance between traditional learning and leisure learning. I guess you could say that the different terms for traditional learning and leisure learning are productive and receptive, but I don't like those terms. It just seems like, I don't know, it makes it seem more like a science. And even though learning is science, I want it to be fun, okay? So traditional studying for me means, sitting down, learning stuff about grammar. Examples of traditional learning, at least for me, are sit-down grammar lessons where I'm, researching how to write this tense, or I'm writing a redaction, a small journal entry or something like that, doing flashcard review. Things that are solely focused on learning about features of the language. Now, leisure learning, like I said, is more receptive. Podcasts, watching movies, YouTubers, reading novels, listening to music, and things like that, where you're seeing the language in its natural environment from native speakers. This is where those resources come in handy, because if you don't have resources, you're not going to be able to do enough leisure learning, and you're not going to be able to test your receptive skills as much. So I think a good example for balance between traditional learning and leisure learning is my experience with Spanish. I started learning Spanish, I don't remember exactly, I was around 8 or 9, but when I started I was just listening to, CDs, and yes, CDs, because it was back in the day. I would listen to, Shakira, and I would watch movies, and I would just absorb through things like that. Obviously I wasn't listening to podcasts, because podcasts were not a thing back then. But I was definitely, just doing receptive leisure learning. I would never sit down and be like, okay, today I'm going to learn how to construct the past subjunctive or something like that. No, it was strictly just I want to know more about this. Also, it helped because my mom speaks Spanish and all that, so I would just ask her. And so I was just absorbing in my natural environment, watching things that I liked, listening to music that I liked. And I did that up until the age of 14, because when I entered high school at 14 years old, I started to take French. So I got to see what language learning was like in a school environment, where you had lessons and you have tests and you have things to prepare for. And I was getting familiar with all this terminology, pronouns and verb tenses and all this, and I was like, oh, this is cool. So I took it upon myself to learn Spanish that way at home. So when I got home, I had this little blue folder. It just said Español on the front. And I would teach myself 1 or 2 grammar lessons every week. I'd be like, this week I'm going to learn how to use the subjunctive, and I'm going to learn, 20 prepositions or something like that. But it really changed how I viewed the language, because I got to see it from, a structural, traditional language learning point of view. Am I making sense? And keep in mind, when I was doing these traditional lessons by myself at home, some of it was already a review for me. I was like, oh, I already knew this word. So there was overlap, and that was really useful because, it just felt good to know that I was already on the right track, and now I was bettering myself with traditional studying. So that's what I would do. I would open my folder, I had sheets of paper, I would just go in studyspanish.com or just Google and research how to construct certain tenses, indirect object pronouns, and it just kind of made everything make more sense. I continued doing that until the age of 18 when I was a senior. Then I took my first official Spanish class. They let me test into it because obviously I wasn't going to start with Spanish 1, holy crap. So they let me take a placement test, and I placed into my school's Spanish 5 IB class. So I just jumped right into a very high level class from all that I had taught myself in those 10 years. Don't let that discourage you, because it clearly doesn't take 10 years to become that fluent in a language. If you're really focused and you push yourself to the hardest, you can become crazy fluent in a language in 1.5 to 2 years. So don't think that I'm saying you have to literally take 10 years to become fluent. It's just how my experience with Spanish happened. But I remember learning it in school was hell, because it was a very high level class where we were taking multiple grammar tests every week, and I was just doing orals about science and politics. And although it was really enriching, all this vocabulary and being able to form opinions and express ideas, and I really appreciate that part of the course. But it made me hate Spanish for a while. I remember being like, I don't even like want to speak this language anymore, because I would walk into Spanish class and be like, oh my god, this shit again. I didn't like that environment because I was so used to how I had taught myself, and I was like, I can do this by myself. However, I did take the Spanish exam. I went the whole year. I got a 7 out of 7, by the way, on the exam. No flex. But that's just proof that you don't need a proper course to learn a language. A lot of people think that they can't learn a language without a proper course. They're like, I need someone more experienced to guide me through this. But if you take the time to teach yourself, you learn so much more about yourself in the process. You know more about what kind of learner you are, you know what kind of person you are. And in my example, 10 years later, you know, I had this like precious baby, and I was like, yay, I taught myself all of this, and no one can take it away from me. Because it's like I had been nurturing it for so long, and it was truly something that was mine. And that's why I think I cherish my Spanish, like fluency so much, is because it's all mine, and no one can take it away. Yeah. Period, poo. Sorry if that was like a big tangent, but that's why traditional studying and leisure studying is so important. Anyway, so my next tip is to make friends and not language partners. It's very, very accessible with the technology that we have today to go out and, you know, go to a website like italki or Interpals. There are a ton of ways that you can just go out, find a language partner in 5 minutes, especially if you're an English speaker, because a lot of people want to learn. If you're only focused on talking to someone in the context of learning something from them, like a language, it's going to feel kind of transactional, I feel like. My advice is to find someone that you truly have things in common with. That way you can learn to talk about the things that you like in that language, and also you're going to make a friend. You know, I've had so many like language partners that lasted like a week just because we didn't really have anything to talk about. And it just slowed down my learning process so much more because I had to always worry about like, you know, who am I going to practice with? So make sure before you know, commit to talking to someone, and, you know, make sure that when you put yourself out in the community, you find people that have the same interests as you. Make friends that happen to speak that language. Not always the easiest, but these are truly the relationships that are going to last and that, you know, are enriching. You know, I have postcards on my wall from like some of my pen pals that I've had, and it's like because I've actually gotten to know these people really, really well. I've made relationships through my language Instagram account because, you know, it's like part of a community. So really just get involved in both the online and, you know, if there's people in your actual physical community, like if you live in Texas, for example, there's probably a ton of Hispanic eateries around you and in your area. So you can go frequent these places, support these communities, and also learn something from them, get to know them. Everything's at your fingertips, you just have to take advantage of it. Notice how I'm saying take advantage of it, the opportunity, and not the people, okay? Don't just like walk in and expect them to teach you Spanish. Just be nice. And if it comes up, tell people that you want to learn their language. Maybe say a couple things to them. If you live in a person where there's a lot of people that speak Yugoslavian Sign Language, go for it. Put yourself out there. Go sign with these people. I don't know how or why Yugoslavian Sign Language became like the default for this video, but it did. By the way, I'm hoping that I'm making sense and like I'm not leaving anything out. I hope that nothing is partial. I hope that I'm making sense. Next tip is to record yourself and talk to yourself. I cannot express how important this is. You see this? That's important. If you didn't see it, my last video was about my reacting to my first words in Portuguese. I reacted to the first video that I ever made in Portuguese, so if you haven't seen it, go watch that video. It's super embarrassing, so you might get a laugh out of it. But that video, making that video, it made me proud and it made me realize how far I've come. So it's also like that sweet ego boost, and it's also just keeping track of, you know, the mistakes that you make, and allows you to make your own progress. Secondly, talking to yourself. Talking to yourself is not crazy. I don't care what anybody says. I will have full-blown conversations with myself in the shower in like Spanish or French or Portuguese, just about like how my day is going, how I'm feeling, what I'm going to eat later, you know, current events and just stuff like that. And when I get out of the shower, for example, I'll like think of, you know, some words that I didn't know how to say, and I'll write them down or make some Quizlet flashcards or something like that. Just something to supplement my memory and also something to supplement my speaking. Then later when I'm in a conversation with a native speaker, I already know I'm comfortable with the sounds, I'm comfortable with the rhythm of the language, because I had this great fake conversation earlier in the shower. So recording yourself, even if it's just a voice memo or videos or anything like that, and also talking to yourself, because it's not crazy no matter what anybody says. And if you look crazy, who cares? You know, you're learning a language, and these people that are calling you crazy are not. There is no amount of studying that you can do on paper and that you will be fluent. There has to be a speaking aspect too. Mind you, this is for spoken language. We are setting all sign languages and otherwise aside. My last tip is realize that it's all on you. It takes time. You are not going to magically learn Portuguese from these flashcards that somebody else made online. You're not going to magically learn Korean from, you know, listening to those videos. Like, learn Korean while you sleep. That's not gonna happen just by, you know, absorbing what other people have put out there and what other people make. It needs to be your effort. It needs to be your goal. It needs to be something that you hold yourself to. It needs to be something that you fully commit to. Like I said earlier, it is truly all on you, and it's not something that should make you feel pressure. You know, if it's yours, there's no deadlines. There's simply goals, and there's simply, you know, trial and error, finding things that work and finding things that don't work. I really hate that my new room is literally in a corner right next to like the noisiest street on the planet and also the fire station. Love that. Like I was saying, it's all on you. Do your own thing, okay? It's all yours. And once you get good, nobody can take it away from you. So like, what do you have to lose? I hope that these tips were all comprehensive. I hope that I made sense. If you have any questions or you want further information or you want further tips, please do not hesitate to message me, comment down below or whatever. My Instagram is @ElysseSpeaks, and I am always on there checking my messages, so do not be afraid. After I finish filming this video, I'm actually going to practice American Sign Language with one of the girls in my American Sign Language class, so I'm super excited. It's been so long. I haven't signed literally since May, so like, because I obviously wasn't meeting anybody in Mexico that knew American Sign Language, and it's so freaking hard to find people that sign. Language learning is something so enriching, especially when you do it yourself. You know, there's the extrinsic aspect, like, you know, you have more job opportunities if you speak a language. It improves everything. It literally improves how you view yourself, your self-confidence, makes you more fluent in your own language. There's so many things that it does for you. And it's just fucking dope, okay? It's super good for picking up chicks. You can act like you don't speak English all the time if you want to avoid stinky men in the street. Like, the possibilities are truly endless. Please learn a language. Please learn a language. I just can't stress how important it is to be at least bilingual in today's society. Yeah, so we'll see you guys next week with another video. If you have any suggestions, comments, concerns, anything, please let me know. And thank you so much for watching again. Até breve. Adios, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, and goodbye.